Um, I don't know that off the top of my head. I may have it in notes from, like, I'd have to go dig through my old notes.
Okay, because I'm sure Julie has that all information.
Yeah.
She keeps track of that, but I don't have. About how many people do you think are gonna be there?
I think we usually assume about 60.
And
I don't want to calibrate the display color.
so 60. And we're assuming what, that people will have more than.
I want to say we like assume, I shouldn't say this. My gut would be to assume about like a hot dog and a half a person, or like hot dogs an adult, one a kid. But yeah.
Are we gonna have outsiders or just religious school?
We usually just have religious school people. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like a Martok, like if there's one or
How much is
two,
probably gonna be here?
but by and large, it's just the real
Religious
people.
school, okay. And how about veggie? How much, like a package too?
I have no idea.
Who's vegetarians? Is Sarah Frost gonna be here? She might stop by, right, as a school committee?
She probably will.
So she's a vegetarian. Who else is vegetarian?
I don't know off the top of my head.
But to be safe, one or two packages.
Let me see if I can find my notes.
Yeah.
Good morning, Sally. Oh, she's still connecting to audio.
Is it Zoom?
Yep.
Sometimes it's like impossible. God.
There we go. Good morning. This is Rabbi Tina.
Hi, how are you?
Hold on. I think that's the issue. Hey, look, now we can probably hear. All right, I'm gonna go, this was logged on for some of our religious school kids. I'm gonna go make sure everything is set in the other room.
Sounds good.
She looks
Good morning, Rabbi. Can you hear us?
Yes,
hear
I
us?
can. Yes, I can.
Excellent. So in a few minutes, I'm going to make some announcements, and then I think Rabbi Karen's going to introduce you, and then we're looking forward to your talk. So hang with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Rabbi Karen is on.
Right there.
She's right there. Look, here we go.
Okay. Well, we're seeing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there?
Yeah, we need to put this up a little bit higher. Let me grab.
I use duct tape.
Whatever you use, it works.
Yeah, just.
Did you want it further back so that you can see more people in the room? You can't if you're using the same.
There's a optimal position, and I'm not sure this is it.
Mitchell's got it. Look, see, check them out.
Oh,
Hello.
hey.
I'm not just a voice anymore.
Okay. Welcome. Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Welcome to our second brunch. Just a few announcements before I turn it over to Rabbi Karen to introduce our speaker. So the next couple of weeks, the 20th of November and for December, we will be supporting the brunch at Beth Abraham. And I want to let you know that we are supporting each other, but we are not doing any commingling of funds or anything like that. So if you've bought your series here for $65, that is not covered over at Beth Abraham. I think there's $7 too, if somebody could. If they know. And I think it's at 10 o'clock over there is when they start. Bob Thumb is going to be on 20 November, which is next week. So we can go over and listen to Bob Thumb talk about Jewish life in 19th century America. Should be interesting. On our schedule on the 11th of December, we had a little bit of a conflict with the speaker. So we will not have a brunch on the 11th as we had previously advertised. And in fact, it's also the Hanukkah happening here at Temple. So again, no brunch on 11 December. One of the things we're doing new this year is recording the presentation for later posting to our YouTube accounts. And so at some point soon, we will upload the brunches, maybe 2 weeks later. I don't know exactly what the time frame is, but they will be up on our YouTube account. And I think that's, and the brunch committee will meet for a short meeting after this if the brunch committee can stay. So at this point, let me have Rabbi Karen Hodney-Hallis come and introduce our speaker. Rabbi?
I'm going to try and come in a direction where I can actually see our speaker. Hi, Rabbi Sally Priesand.
Hi.
We're so glad that you are here. I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet you a few times, but most recently I had the joy of seeing you in Cincinnati just this spring when you were there to introduce us to your new collection that is down there. We had the exhibit for all of the artistic renditions from the 50th, but also your personal collection of writings and communications from the American Jewish Archives. I'm saying that because we are in a group of people who are close to Cincinnati, and anything we can do to have the opportunity to learn more about you, I hope that they will take that trip down there. But it is wonderful to see you. For those of you who are not familiar with Rabbi Sally Priesand, I'm not going to tell her whole story because she has so much to share, but 1972 was a pivotal year in Jewish life. It was the first year that we could call a woman in our community a rabbi. Rabbi Sally Priesand was the first. It was not an easy road. About 20 years later, when I was considering the rabbinate, it was because of Sally and others like her that I felt that that was even an option. Her career has been an incredible one. Even the small, I see, we have class people coming in, you guys coming in? We have our youth who are coming in to meet her as well, it's wonderful. But Sally, you were ordained in 72, but you had many positions. You retired, I think it was in 2006.
That is correct.
I would love for you to share your story with us, because how you want to share your story is probably a lot more interesting than just the dates and the locations of all the places you've served, because I know that your rabbinate is going far more in depth than just those experiences. So I'll pass that over to you.
Hey, thank you for that warm and gracious introduction. I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm grateful for the gift of modern technology that makes it possible for us to connect in this way. I don't know your rabbis very well, but the fact that you have two female rabbis tells me a lot about them and about all of you and your congregation. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with my colleagues at times other than conventions and to get to know the work they are doing. It always lifts my spirits and fills me with confidence that our future is in good hands. This morning, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey to the rabbinate and share some reflections on my career, having just celebrated the 50th anniversary of my ordination. And there will be time at the end for your questions. I decided I wanted to be a rabbi when I was 16 years old. Unfortunately, I don't remember why. I remember always wanting to be a teacher, and whatever my favorite subject was what I was going to teach. And so one year I was going to be an English teacher, one year a math teacher, one year a French teacher. And in the end, I decided to be a teacher of Judaism, which is really what a rabbi is. Fortunately for me, my parents gave me what I consider to be one of the greatest gifts that a parent can give a child, and that is the courage to dare and to dream. As a result, I remained focused on my goals, unconcerned that no woman had ever been ordained in America, and determined to succeed despite the doubts I heard expressed in the organized Jewish community. In those days, I did not think very much about being a pioneer, nor was it my intention to champion the rights of women. I just wanted to be a rabbi. Although my parents were actively involved in Jewish organizational life, my family was not particularly observant. We did light Shabbat candles, celebrate Hanukkah with our extended family, and every year have a Passover Seder to which each of my siblings and I were encouraged to invite a non-Jewish friend to share the festivities and learn more about Judaism. I can still see my father at the head of our table, reclining on his pillow, leaving the table at the appropriate time to wash his hands, explaining the symbols on the Seder plate, and reading every single word of the Haggadah. My mother, of course, had been preparing for days, making gefilte fish from scratch and fashioning those delicious matzo balls that were especially light and fluffy. One year, my father's business brought him into contact with a Catholic children's home run by a group of nuns. Passover was approaching, and in the course of conversation, the Mother Superior began asking questions about the customs and traditions of this holiday. Before long, my father had offered to conduct a Seder for 52 nuns and the Monsignor, volunteering my mother, of course, to oversee the meal and make enough chicken soup and matzo balls for all the participants. My father read the Haggadah, and the youngest nun recited the 4 questions. My mother, whom we lost just a few years ago at the age of 101, remembered entering the dining room that day and being greeted by a huge sign that simply said Shalom. Moreover, the nuns presented her with a beautiful 2-tiered silver tray that we continue to cherish. My father died in 1968. I will never forget the kindness of the nuns. He, dressed in their traditional garb, came to our home while we were sitting Shiva to remember my father and give thanks for his life. And I'm ever grateful to my parents for teaching us by example that all people are God's children, and we have much to learn from each other. Now, as soon as I began to express more than a passing interest in our religious heritage, my parents made certain to include among my birthday or Hanukkah presents more Jewish books, often inscribed by my father with a few words of encouragement, a wonderful way to expand my horizons and at the same time validate the seriousness of my intention. I grew up in the suburbs of Cleveland. And when I was in the 8th grade, my family moved from the east side of town to the west side. As a result, my teenage years were spent in a predominantly non-Jewish neighborhood. In fact, my brothers and I were the only Jews in our high school. That made our participation in religious school and youth group all the more important. We were active members of Beth Israel, the West Temple, a small congregation that taught me important lessons about what it means to be a temple family and how central to Jewish life is the task of tikkun olam, repairing the world. Although I did not become bat mitzvah, I was confirmed and continued my religious school studies through the 12th grade. As the time for college approached, my desire to be a teacher of Judaism remained firm. And I knew that for me, the best way to accomplish that goal was a career in the rabbinate. I applied to the undergraduate program jointly sponsored by the University of Cincinnati and the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. I was accepted, and in 1964, I began my studies. My years in rabbinic school were fraught with challenge, Some people thought I came to marry a rabbi rather than be one. In fact, I had been dating one of my fellow students for some time when a professor went up to him and said, "Well, when are you going to marry her, do the school a favor, and get rid of her?" So there were challenges along the way, and my sincerity was often suspect. I, I'm just going to stop for 1 second to make sure you can still see me because my screen changed.
Did I give you a hand in any way?
You can still see me? Well, consequently, I was under constant pressure to prove myself. Always, I felt the need to be better and do better than my classmates so that my commitment and my academic ability would not be questioned. Occasionally, I sensed that some people would not be overly upset if I failed. More than once, it would have been easy to drop out, but I persevered because I truly wanted to be a teacher of Torah. Happily, I had the support of Dr. Nelson Glick, who at that time was president of the College Institute. He gave me his unqualified support and took care of a lot of little problems in the background that I probably just never even heard about. Unfortunately, he died the year before I was ordained. But his wife, Helen, a distinguished physician and researcher in Cincinnati, told me that prior to his death, he said there were three things he wanted to live to do, and one of them was to ordain me. His vision and his commitment laid the foundation for the ordination of women. And fortunately for me and for all of us, his successor, Dr. Alfred Gottschalk, shared that vision. And when he became president of the College Institute, he made the dream a reality by ordaining me on June 3rd, 1972, together with the 35 men who were my classmates. Only in recent years have I come to understand how bold and daring that action was on his part. Apparently, certain members of the faculty tried to convince him that I should not be ordained. 50 years ago, I did not really realize the amount of pressure that he was under, nor did I understand the courage it took for him to step into someone else's shoes and fulfill a mission someone else had begun. How grateful I am that he was willing to do that and to affirm the equality of women in the Reformed Jewish community. Now, finding a job was not all that easy. Some congregations wanted me for my publicity value. They wanted to be able to say they were the first to hire a female rabbi, and others would not talk to me at all. In the end, I was the last person in my class to find a job. But in my opinion, I got the best job of all. Assistant rabbi at Stephen Wise Free Synagogue in New York City. It always seemed particularly appropriate to me that I would come to a synagogue with a reputation for commitment to equality and social justice. And Rabbi Edward E. Klein, my senior rabbi, always took great pride in being introduced as the first equal opportunity employer in the American rabbinate. Oh, I stayed at the Free Synagogue for 7 years. And to be honest, the circumstances under which I left were not all that pleasant. I hoped I would be given a chance at some time to be the senior rabbi, but that was not to be. Neither that synagogue nor any other was ready nor willing to grant the title of senior rabbi to a woman. In fact, for 2 years, I was unable to find a full-time position. I served as a chaplain at Lenox Hill Hospital in Manhattan and accepted a part-time position at Temple Beth El in Elizabeth, New Jersey, a synagogue of older members who were always very warm and welcoming. In 1981, I became rabbi of Monmouth Reform Temple in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, a position I was privileged to hold for 25 years. The decision to retire 16 years ago was my own, believing as I do that rabbis and a lot of other people should know when to leave. It is always good to say goodbye when they still like you. I did choose, however, to remain in my community, and as Rabbi Emerita, I worship at my temple every week, enjoying as I do the view from the pew. I sit in the back row and the kids come and sit with me and they call me back row Sally. I have never regretted my decision to enter the rabbinate, and clearly my life has been enriched by the people I have been privileged to serve for 5 decades now. I am grateful to God that part of my life's work has been to open new doors for women in the Jewish community. But at the same time, I have tried never to lose sight of the larger mission of the Jewish people, which is to derive from the words of Torah a set of values and a sense of holiness that will enable us always to be partners with God in completing the world. And what that means from my vantage point is not only participating in the task of Tikkun Olam, but creating a Jewish community that is based on equality and inclusivity, remembering that all of us are God's children, and as such, we should all have the opportunity to fulfill our creative potential to the fullest. My experience tells me that we are richer for the gifts that female rabbis and female leaders bring to our shared task. Rethinking previous models of leadership and opening doors to partnership and networking. Discovering new models of divinity, knowing that God embraces qualities and characteristics, both masculine and feminine. Training new leaders to be more gender aware by welcoming to our institutions of higher learning respected female scholars who share with us valuable lessons and insights unique to women. Creating new role models and allowing to be heard, often for the first time, the stories of those whose voices have been silenced for too long, the countless number of women who have enriched our people from biblical times on. Surely one of the most powerful lessons we have learned from the civil rights movement is that if you do not see someone who looks like you in the position of leadership, then you begin to feel left out. You have a sense that it cannot be done. We teach our daughters and our sons that everything is possible. There are no limits on what they can achieve when seeking to fulfill their creative potential and contribute to the vitality of the Jewish community. But sometimes when they interact with the institutions of Judaism, they discover a different message, a message that continues to exist in the larger society of which we are a part, a reluctance to believe that women are as competent and capable as men. For decades now, we have been trying to change that attitude in every field of human endeavor: medicine, law, accounting, education, even politics. For the sake of ourselves and our survival, we need to continue to change it in the Jewish community as well, to make certain that our daughters and granddaughters can be whatever they want to be, that they have not only equal opportunity, but equal pay, and that they are free from all forms of sexual harassment. Ordaining women as rabbis has also taught us something about the meaning of success. When I was first ordained, I thought the ultimate goal was to be rabbi of a large congregation. Indeed, as the first woman ordained, I thought it was my obligation. In so many different ways, we are taught that bigger is better. But in reality, life is not measured by wealth or power, material possessions, or fame. Life is counted in terms of goodness and growth. Someone once said that our purpose in life is not to get ahead of other people, but to get ahead of ourselves. Always to play a better game of life. That's what success is all about. Have we done our best? Are we continuing to grow? Are we more deeply affected today by love and beauty and joy than we were yesterday? Are we more sensitive and compassionate to others? Have we learned to overcome our fears and accept our failures? Have we triumphed over selfishness and cruelty, bitterness and hatred? Do we count our blessings in such a way that we make our blessings count? That is what success is all about. And in the words of Albert Schweitzer, the great secret of success is to go through life as a person who never gets used up. Grow into your ideals so that life can never rob you of them. Now, people often think that I am the first woman rabbi, but in fact, I am the second. Regina Jonas was the first woman in the world to become a rabbi. She studied for the rabbinate in Berlin, but the professor who was her mentor died the year before she was ordained. And then the seminary refused to follow through with her ordination, although she had completed all of the requirements, including a thesis entitled, "Can Women Serve as Rabbis?" She was forced to wait until 1935 when she was ordained privately by Rabbi Max Dienemann, president of the Association of Liberal Rabbis in Berlin. At first, she was permitted to work only in schools hospitals, and homes for the elderly. But as rabbis began to emigrate or be deported during the Holocaust, she was invited to preach and fulfill rabbinic duties at various synagogues, gaining a reputation for her pastoral work and her preaching ability. A few years ago, I had the privilege of visiting Berlin and walking in the footsteps of Rabbi Regina Jonas with a group of rabbis, lay people, and historians. The trip was the idea of Dr. Gary Zola of the American Jewish Archive. He convinced the United States Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad to place a plaque at Terezin in memory of Regina Jonas. And he invited the Jewish Women's Archive and its founding director, Dr. Dale Reamer, to co-sponsor the trip. It was an amazing experience that words cannot really convey. I was quite shaken by the number of similarities between my life and that of Regina Jonas. She did not see herself as a pioneer or a famous person, and neither did I. I just wanted to be a rabbi, and so did she. Both of us shared a similar definition of feminism, that is, all people should be given the opportunity to fulfill their God-given potential to the fullest. Her mentor died the year before she was ordained, and so did mine. In her case, the seminary refused to follow through, even though she had completed all the requirements. In my case, those who tried to stop my ordination were unsuccessful. I was always held to a higher standard, as was she, and often male rabbis and lay leaders told me to be patient, a word with which she was also familiar. She did not think a female rabbi should marry and have children. It would be too difficult. And ultimately, I came to the same decision, believing that I myself would never be able to do both and do them well. She loved to preach and teach. In Terezin, we found papers handwritten with titles of some of her lectures, Women in Judaism, Women and the Bible, all topics that I and all women rabbis have been asked to speak about. Now, before being deported to Terezin, Rabbi Jonas gave her documents to the Berlin Jewish community for safekeeping. Had she not done so, we would know even less than we do now about her life and the significant contributions she made to the Jewish community, which continue to bear fruit even today. Not realizing that I was in effect following in her footsteps, I announced several years ago that I would be donating my documents and papers to the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati. And I invited all female rabbis of whatever denomination to do the same, so that those doing research on the history of women in the rabbinate could come to one place and find what they need. When we were in Berlin, we had an opportunity to see her papers that had remained hidden until after the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is probably why so many people have never heard of her. We were overwhelmed with emotion when the archivist brought out this small, tiny box of papers, all we have left of Rabbi Regina Jonas, except for those few handwritten notes we saw at Terezin. It was at Terezin that we dedicated a plaque in her memory, ensuring that she would never again be forgotten. Participating in the ceremony were, among others, Helga Hoskova, who at that time, an artist who was one of the 100 remaining survivors of Terezin, and her son and granddaughter, who provided music on the violin and organ for the ceremony. I will never again hear Kol Nidre without remembering their rendition. Helga's story reminds us that God enables ordinary people to do extraordinary things, and that Holocaust survivors triumph over Hitler by returning to life rather than retreating from it, by having children and grandchildren, and showing that despite the horrors of the Holocaust, there is meaning and purpose in human life. The four first, as we call ourselves, Rabbi Sandy Sasso of the Reconstructionist movement, Rabbi Amy Eilberg of the conservative movement, Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz of the modern Orthodox movement, and myself representing Reform, participated in the ceremony at Terezin. Each of us read a passage written by Regina Jonas herself, and this is part of what I chose to read. I hope a time will come for all of us in which there will be no more questions on the subject of woman. For as long as there are questions, something is wrong. But if I must say what drove me as a woman to become a rabbi, two elements come to mind: my belief in the godly calling and my love for people. God has placed abilities and callings in our heart without regard to gender. Thus, each of us has the duty, whether man or woman, to realize those gifts God has given. If you look at things this way, one takes woman and man for what they are, human beings. Every time I read that passage, I can't help but to be amazed that it was written in 1935. There was something quite remarkable about giving life to her words that day and affirming our connection to her. Then we recited El Molei Rachamim, perhaps the first time that this memorial prayer had ever been recited for Regina Jonas. As I think about her, one of the things I admire most is that she chose the well-being of her people over her own self-interest. She could have escaped the horrors of the Holocaust, but chose instead to accompany her people to the concentration camp, to continue to minister to their needs and help them find meaning and purpose in the values of Jewish life. We cannot help but stand in awe of her courage. We returned from our journey prepared to tell her story, to ensure that she be given her rightful place in the chain of Jewish tradition that binds together all the generations of our people, past, present, and future, and determined to make certain that her yahrzeit would be observed from year to year in synagogues of all denominations throughout the world. The actual date of her death is unknown, but with the help of the Holocaust Museum in Washington and Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, we determined that she was taken from Perizim together with her mother on October 12, 1944. Her name actually appears on the transport list. And she arrived in Auschwitz 2 days later on October 14, 1944, where it is assumed that she was murdered that very day, because we never heard anything more about her. And that day happened to be Shabbat Bereshit, the day on which we start reading Torah all over again with the story of creation. Therefore, we have chosen Shabbat Bereshit as the date of her yahrzeit, and we hope that next fall, if you haven't done it already, you will join us in saying Kaddish for her. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share her story. I like to think that whenever we do, we bring honor to her memory. I conclude now with some words of wisdom that came about a few years ago when I was asked to contribute to a book called If I Only Had 5 Things to Pass On from My Life, They Would Be. The book was to be edited by Molly Meir. Unfortunately, I don't think it was ever published, which is a shame. I was really interested in hearing what other people said. But over the years, I found this to be a wonderful exercise from time to time, especially slichot, before the holy days, when we take stock of our lives. Take a few minutes and think about what it is you want to pass on from your life. And these are my 5 things. Number 1, know yourself and be yourself. When I was in rabbinical school, I always assumed I would marry and have children. In fact, I often said that in my synagogue, there would be a nursery next to my study. After I was ordained and began serving God and the Jewish people, I discovered that I would never be able to have a career and a family and do both well. I stand in awe of those who can, but I know that I'm not one of them. I chose to devote all my time and energy to my career, and I have never been sorry, because I know that the people whose lives I touch are now part of my extended family. Number 2, don't worry. There are moments in every life when worry overwhelms us and inhibits our ability to function. For those times, I have developed my worry rule. Sit down every morning for 10 minutes and worry as much as you want. Then get up and welcome the many opportunities for growth and for good that each new day brings, and make the most of them. There will be another 10 minutes tomorrow to worry again. Number 3, always try your best. Many people hesitate to try new things because they are afraid of failure. I believe the only true failure is in never daring to fail. Success feels good, but there's nothing wrong with failure, as long as we try our best and learn from our mistakes. The world moves forward every day because someone is willing to take the risk. Number 4, live with humility. Our sages taught People should have two pockets so they can reach into one or the other according to their needs. In one pocket, there should be a slip of paper with the words, "For my sake was the world created." And in the other, the words, "I am but dust and ashes." In our day and age, humility seems to be a forgotten virtue. Being humble does not mean that we should deny or negate our achievements. On the contrary, taking pride in what we have accomplished brings great joy. But pausing to remember that we do not stand alone is even more enriching. Saying thank you on a regular basis to God, who gives us the power to create, and to others who have helped us along the way, keeps us from becoming arrogant. And number 5, maintain your sense of humor. One way to deal with life's difficulties is by discovering and embracing the healing power of laughter. Many a tense moment has been relieved by bringing a bit of humor to the situation. An old Yiddish proverb advises, "Weep before God, laugh before people." Learning to laugh soothes the spirit, and learning to laugh at yourself keeps you from taking yourself too seriously. Laughter is contagious, and it makes the world a more pleasant place. As I come now to the end of my remarks and prepare to take your questions, let me share with you my favorite poem, "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost, which pretty much sums up the way I feel about my life. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I am prepared now for your questions. I don't know specifically how you want to answer the questions, but I'll let you all decide that, and don't be bashful.
This is not a bashful group, I assure you. What an honor to have you speak. I have Aaron Burke who'd like to ask his first question.
You indicated that the faculty was not very well behind you, but what were your classmates like? What was their response to you, the 32 men that you?
Okay, my classmates on the whole were very supportive, and some of them, of course, did not think that women should be rabbis. But I did a lot of traveling and speaking during my last year. Dr. Glick was very smart about that because the Jewish world was not prepared for a female rabbi. So he sent me out to speak at congregations around the country, which was a little bit difficult for me because I'm a very private person. And it's kind of the paradox of my personality that I became a public person. But I remember, for example, I went to a conservative congregation in Texas, and 1,000 people showed up. I was just absolutely amazed. And I also had to get used to having press conferences and being on the news. And one time I remember I went to a community on the plane. There was a senator, there was an entertainer, there were a lot of famous people on the plane. And as we landed, the attendant said, "Will Rabbi Sally please stay on the plane?" So all the other people got off, and then I got off. And as I got off, all the cameras and lights went on. And they ushered me into a room in the airport for a press conference. So I think for me, the hardest thing was always trying to make certain that every question they asked was the first time I heard it. When of course I always heard the same questions over and over again. My classmates, when I was away, used to tape record. In those days we had those little tape recorders. Used to tape record my classes so that I wouldn't miss anything. But I remember that sometimes it was hard for the professors to get used to having a woman in the class. Their language wasn't always the best language, and they used to say, welcome gentlemen, oh, and lady. And so sometimes when they were recording the class, I would hear the professor say, "Turn off the recorder for a minute." Obviously, he wanted to say something that he didn't really want me to hear. When I was ordained, my classmates all very spontaneously stood up when I was called to the bima. And that is, they wanted to honor this moment in Jewish history. And that is a memory I have that I will always cherish.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who would like to ask the next question?
Excuse me, I'm curious, how long after your ordination did it take for another woman to be ordained? Was there another woman who was going through classes before you were ordained?
There were no other women when I was at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. Now, what we have to remember is that, as I said, I went to the University of Cincinnati first. And so you have to go for 4 years and get your undergraduate degree. And now you go for 5 more years to rabbinic school, with the first year being in Israel. The Israel program was not yet available. I was part of the last class that went to the undergraduate program, which enabled me to skip the first year of rabbinic school. So it was interesting. One day I was an undergraduate, and the next day I was in the second year of rabbinic school, and everybody said, "Oh, look, she's still here. What's going on?" So after me, actually at, trying to remember, I think at HUC, it took 4 more years before a woman was ordained at the New York school. And, but remembering that Sandy Sasso was ordained at the Reconstructionist College, she and her husband served in Indianapolis at the same congregation for their whole career. And she was ordained in 2 years after I was. She and her husband, she actually, most people thought that she was going to be the first woman rabbi, and then I sort of popped up. But we're very good friends, and I want to tell you about, if you're looking, Hanukkah is coming. If you're looking for a good children's book for your children or grandchildren. She just wrote a book about me. It's called Sally Opened Doors. And it's a great book. It's really part of a series that she has written. The first of the series was about Regina Jonas, called Regina Persisted. The second one is about Judith Kaplan, who is called Judy Led the Way. She was the first to have a bat mitzvah. And this year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of that. And I'm the third book in the series of this. So if you're looking for Hanukkah books, I highly recommend them.
So I have a question. I'm not sure exactly how to ask it, but.
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was on. So when did you feel accepted by your peers? Or did you, once you were ordained and had a congregation, did you feel that acceptance from your peers?
Well, I think that it probably took a while, to be accepted. I remember once that an Orthodox rabbi said that I would be little more than a footnote in history. Many people did not think that this was going to start having more women ordained, but it did. I think that for a lot of people, coming to accept a female rabbi has to do with experiencing her. You can't really try to change people's minds. You just have to do it. And then hopefully, after a few weeks at my synagogue, people would say, oh yeah, this isn't so bad. Like, why not? And in terms of other rabbis, a lot of it, well, I guess I was here at Monmouth Ford Temple for 25 years. And what I remember is that not all of my colleagues in the community accepted me right away. And I would say I remember the first or second year I was here, I went to the community Yom HaShoah program, and another Reform rabbi was scheduled to lead the Kaddish, and he was unable to come. So they asked me if I would, and then about 2 seconds later, they came back and said, oh, sorry, the Orthodox are here and you can't do it. So those things happened, and I will tell you, not until the year I retired was I able to lead El Malei Rachamim at the Yom HaShoah service. I was, I don't know, I guess I was patient, but what was so exciting to me about it was that the Orthodox rabbi stood next to me. I said the Hebrew, he said the English. Okay, so things do change. And there was another time when I was on a committee of the Federation, and of all the rabbis on the committee, the Orthodox rabbi and I were the two who held the same opinion. So I always thought that was interesting too. So also, I think I should mention that in the beginning, I was very conscious of the fact that people judged the idea of women in the rabbinate by me and what I was doing and how I was doing. So I was very, very conscious of that. And if they were in my synagogue as a guest and I didn't give the best sermon in the world that day, I mean, rabbis have ups and downs too. And they would go out and probably think we don't need women as rabbis. But on the other hand, through guests at my synagogue, I got to reach a lot of people. And that was important to me. And it took many years for me to be able to know that several women had been ordained and that I didn't have to be the only representative anymore. And it was okay to say no if I was asked to do something and I didn't want to do it.
Rabbi, I know that you said that you went into the rabbinate not because you wanted to set an example or be an inspiration for others, because you just wanted to be a rabbi. But nonetheless, I find your story inspirational. And as the father-in-law of a female rabbi, who I know also finds your story inspirational, I want to thank you for sharing this with us. But I have a question. The majority, probably for 10 years, maybe longer, the majority of rabbis who are being ordained in Reform are women. And it's not unusual for a congregation like ours to have the women, 2 women rabbis, and some congregations will have 3. Do you think that I don't want to use the word, I'll use the word, the pervasiveness today of women in the rabbinate has changed the rabbinate or has made it different than it would have been, but for the fact that there's so many women who are rabbis now? If you look at the rabbinate today compared to 25 years ago when it was rare to have a woman rabbi, how have things become different?
Yes, well, I think that if we look historically, we know that in many different professions, when there are a lot of women who enter it, men sort of decide to go elsewhere. That's the problem of men, I think, and also of probably the Jewish community as a whole, making certain that everybody feels comfortable serving the Jewish community. And women have changed the rabbinate for women and for men. I think women have allowed men to be more nurturing. When I grew up, it was what the rabbi said. I remember we used to go to the board meeting and there would be a discussion. The rabbi would say, this is what we're going to do. And everybody would say, yes, rabbi. And the meeting would be over and we'd all go out to have dinner together. So it was that idea of authority. Women bring much more of an emphasis on partnership and networking. When I came to my congregation, for example, when I came to be interviewed, I said that I want to work with you. And I was on every committee except the financial committees. I will tell you, my congregation was great. They said to me that right at the beginning, that you teach us Torah, we'll worry about the money. And it's a great model. I highly recommend it. Of course, I was involved somewhat, but I didn't have to go to any of those meetings. And so there are things, I think we've just opened the horizons more for people to think differently about gender. And, I also like to think that when I opened the doors for women, I also opened the doors for others. And although the Reform movement wasn't prepared when I was ordained, I hope we'll be prepared as more of the LGBTQ community is entering the rabbinate, and non-binary, Jews of color. I think we need to educate ourselves so that we will be ready for when they enter the rabbinate. They're already at the College Institute. So Thank you for your kind words, and because you do, you are right. There are many congregations that now have 2 female rabbis there, or 3 female rabbis. One of the benefits of my spending this last year speaking around the country via Zoom, which for me has been the silver lining of COVID. Is that I get to see all of so many of my female colleagues and appreciate all the things that they are doing. And you know, when I first came to my temple, we also had a female cantor for most all of the time that I was there. And little boys would ask their parents, can boys be rabbis too? And I used to tell parents, please be certain to take your children to other synagogues so they can see that men can do this too.
Anyone else have a follow-up question? I want to say, in case anyone else is coming up with one, I'm looking at my son over there, and when you just said, you know, that men can be rabbis too, I remember the first time you wore a suit, he said, look, now I look like mommy. I thought it was wonderful. He's walking away, so he didn't hear me. I wanted to say, just as it was important for you to share the story of Regina Jonas, it's important for us that we continue to talk with you and give honor to you. I think that you've shown us through your graciousness in wanting to give voice to everyone else who's come before you, as well as those who have been a partner with you, that it does change the model. It changes our understanding, as you said, of success. It changes our understanding of what it means to live in a Jewish world and to interact with people who experience Judaism on a different level than you, perhaps less academic, or perhaps, as you said, one who goes into fundraising, but that there are different models of what it means to have these strengths and these passions about teaching what it means to be Jewish. I think for those of us in this room, you'd find that your presence, just as you said, you know, you never had the chance to meet Regina Jonas. Many of us have never had the chance to meet you. But I can tell you, not just my son, but we have a father of a rabbi, we have a sister of a rabbi, we have a father-in-law of a rabbi in this room, who are all women. And again, we want to pay it forward and share with you that it's humbling to be in your presence, even if you didn't enter the rabbinate to get into this position. We honor you, we thank you, and you deserve all of this wonderful praise and attention, and I can't wait to see your portrait in the portrait gallery.
Oh, that's right. We have two things, let me say. One about the portrait. I don't know if your congregation knows, but my portrait is going to be in the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian. And the process was really very interesting. I chose not a painting, but a photograph. And the photograph has finally been finished and it's going through the bureaucratic process of our government, but maybe by next summer we will be able to hang it. So I think that's very exciting, and it's because of my friends Rabbi Amy and Gary Perlin, who work with the National Portrait Gallery. They're great supporters. They've made it possible, and it is their dream to create at the museum a Jewish section. Right now, all they have is Isaac Mayer Wise and me. I mean, there are Jews in other sections, but there's not specifically a Jewish section to show how much American Jews have contributed to freedom and democracy in our country. My second question has to do, I always think of this when I get, sometimes I'm a little down when I hear some of the things that are going on that show me that we haven't made that much progress. But this always reminds me how much progress we have made. Many years ago, I was at the Solomon Schechter School, conservative day school in our community. I'm very close to our cantor and her family. They've kind of adopted me. And her son, who is, let's see, now he's in college studying musical theater, but at that time he was 6 years old. He called and asked me, they were having Bring a Friend to School Day, and he called and asked me if I would go with him. So I said yes, and when I was there, they asked me if I would say a few words to the kids. So all these little kids are sitting on the floor in front of me, and I said, when I was a little older than you, I decided that I wanted to be a rabbi, but there was a problem. Does anybody know what the problem was? This little boy raised his hand and said, "You were too little." Another one said, "You were too young." And so I looked at Simon, I said, "Simon, would you like to tell us why?" And he said, "Because you're a girl." They told me that in a conservative day school, they were already aware, it didn't even dawn on them that a woman couldn't be a rabbi. So we are making progress, and I try to look for all those examples of the progress we are making. It's going to be, it's good for us, it's good for the Jewish community and the Jewish people. So I am so grateful for all of your kind words, and thank you so much for inviting me to be with you. If you have a chance, since you're close to Cincinnati, I hope you will go to the American Jewish Archives to see, maybe you'll take a temple trip to see the exhibit called Sally Paved the Way.
We tried to start that this summer, but we're going to try and do it again. It didn't happen because of an issue at the college, but we're going to do it. It's important to us. And I just want to say, I know that in our conversation, we talk about the inspiration you are. I just also want to say that part of that is your resilience. And having heard you speak before, we often don't hear about the things that were really small attempts to make setbacks. And having been at your display that at the archives, I remember seeing that letter that they wrote back to you saying it would be great if you applied for the education program instead, if I remember. And so as we acknowledge all your accomplishments, I also want to say that all the more so for all of the adversarial things that you experienced along the way, that you overcame them. All of the patriarchy that would have kept you in a different place, that you went above and beyond to make sure that that didn't stop you from opening all those doors. So I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you. That's very, very gracious of you. I think I developed sort of a protective shield around myself, and I just let things bounce off of me. And also, when people would tell me why they think women shouldn't be rabbis, I would just say, "Thank you for sharing your opinion," and walk away. You just don't get very far arguing.
True, but I hope you'll find that years later you'll run into them again and their opinions have changed, as you said, by how well you show them.
Yeah, maybe they'll see my portrait at the gallery.
They better. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Hi, how are you?